While this controller is drying on the cherry table, I'm going to go ahead and mix up the stain. I'm going to show you the components that I use to make the stain. We're going to use the same pre-stain controller as a stain base. And in that base, we're going to put trans tint dye. Okay? Now, I've come up with a formula for this table that looks good to us. It's a very basic cherry formula, and it uses 3 colors. It uses reddish brown, number 6003, golden brown, number 6002, and dark walnut, 6005. The way that we mix it is I've got about 1 pint or half of the contents of the stain controller that's left in this. So the recipe I'm going to give you that's going to show up on the screen is for 1 pint of stain. You can mix more if you need more, or you can mix less if you need less. A pint is going to be more than enough for this project. I always recommend you mix a little bit more than you think you're going to need, because you don't want to run out in the middle. Okay, the recipe that I'm using calls for 1 tablespoon of golden brown. These tablespoons you can get in a set like this at any kitchen supply place. They're a great way to measure small amounts of the trans tint. So we'll put one tablespoon golden brown, try not to make a mess. We'll use 1 teaspoon of reddish brown. Now that's a teaspoon, not a tablespoon. It's a smaller amount. And I'm going to use 1/4 teaspoon of dark walnut. Stir that with a paint stick. Okay, the stain is mixed up. Before you go ahead and apply it to your project, please, please check it on a sample. Now this is a piece of wood. It's the same type of wood that we use for the project. I put the controller on, and all I'll do is I'll just take a little bit and I'll apply it to the sample, and just make sure that it's the color that you want. This looks perfect. This is exactly the color that we wanted. If it was a little bit too dark, you could add more stain controller to it, the clear base, to make it lighter. If it wasn't red enough, you could add more reddish brown to it. Play with it, or feel free to play with it until you get to the color that you want. But the color that you see when it's applied over the controller when it's wet will be pretty much what it will look like with finish on it. So you can practice on samples. Okay, let's start staining. Now, I've done a few things to get in preparation for staining. First of all, I've got gloves on. I've got plenty of rags over here. I also turn the table on its back because I want to do the underside of this ledge first. I'm going to use a little bit better brush than what I use to apply the controller. This is a golden Taklon brush. This has a much better chiseled edge than the other brush, which gives me a little bit more control in tight spaces. So we'll just go ahead, dip the brush in it, and again, you want to be a little bit more careful now. You basically just want to put the stain on where you're going to get, where it wants to go, and work on a manageable section. Now you can see that this brush gets into those tight spaces a little bit better. Go ahead and apply the stain to an area that you can easily wipe off the excess before it dries. So I'm going to work just on this underside of the ledge. And then I'll go ahead and wipe the stain off. Using a clean rag. And that's what it's all about. That's a nice looking stain for this cherry. Looks very natural, not too dark, not too artificial looking. If you miss a spot, just come back with the stain and hit it again. Okay. When you're working on the show surfaces, just like we told you with the pre-stain controller, try to work on an area that you can apply the stain and wipe it off easily. So what I'm going to do strategy-wise, I'm going to do each leg separately. In other words, I'm going to apply the stain to the leg and then wipe it off. What I like to do is work from the bottom up. That way, if you do get a drip, it's easy to correct. Now I'm going to just try and get the stain just on the leg. I'm not going to get it on any other surface, or I'm going to try not to get it on any other surface. Now, I'm not going to worry about getting the inside of this. I'm not going to stain that because you'll never see it. But what I will stain is the leg, or the inside of the leg where the drawer covers it, because when you open the drawer, you'll see that. I'll also stain the underside of this top stretcher and then the top of this. Before I do that, I'm going to wipe off the stain. And oh yeah. Now that is exactly what you want cherry to look like. And that's why it's important to do all that preparation work ahead of time, like checking for glue splotch, checking for dents, dings, all that kind of thing. That will really pay off and give you a nice stain appearance. So what I'll do is I'll just continue to go around, and once again I'm just going to try and work on an area that I can easily apply the stain to and wipe it off. Okay, I'm coming around to the last final leg here. You want to try to, when you're working with water-based stains, is to always keep what's called a wet edge. Now, it's inevitable on a complicated project like this that you're going to run into some problems with maybe you might hit a area that won't take the stain for whatever reason, or you may get a lap mark or something like that. I'm going to show you how to deal with that. Just a quick tip on these drawers. All you really need to do is just stain the front, the top edge, and maybe the bottom edge of the drawer. Don't worry about trying to individually stain these dovetails. That's end grain. That will just go dark when you put a finish on it anyways. I don't want to get any stain whatsoever on this nice figured maple. So I'm not going to even worry about trying to put stain just on the dovetails here. So what I'll do is I'll just very carefully apply the stain to the top here. And once again, this brush that I'm using allows me very fine control over what I'm doing. It's the golden Taklon brush I spoke about earlier. So I'll just do the top here. Wipe it off. And then I'll come and do just the bottom. And I'm just trying to be very careful where I'm applying it. I don't want to get any on the inside, and I definitely don't want to get any stain on the maple. And then finally, I'll get just a little bit of stain on that brush and just put it on the top. looks good. Well, as careful as I was with the solvent wipe and some other things, I got another glue splotch right here. It's where the glue wasn't removed. The fix for that, if you do get it during the staining process, I'm just going to put a little bit of stain on there, and I'm going to take some 220 grit sandpaper, and while the stain is wet, I'm just going to very lightly sand that area, and bingo, that should take it right off. Another problem you may run into is you may find an area where some of the stain has set up and it doesn't wipe off cleanly with the rag. If that's the case, what I do is I just get a small plant mister or some sort of a spray bottle. Just has clear water in it, and all you have to do is just spritz that area, and that's usually enough to get that dried stain worked off enough so that it comes off. If for whatever reason the stain has just dried too long and it doesn't come off, what you'd want to do is just take some more of the stain and hit that area again. Take your cloth and that's usually enough to get that stain, that dried stain worked off enough to where it will be evened out. Now that little trick I showed you previously about with the plant mister is also a good way to check and make sure that everything is stained evenly. What you can do is, if you want, you can just come around and very lightly just kind of go over everything. Try not to have it fall off.